Hello, friends, and welcome to today's version of Horse Mysteries Solved. Today we are going to talk about the horse that will not go forward or is very reluctant to do so, and also how to be the detective who solves that problem. So if you have a horse who won't go forward and you want to know the answer, I'm sure you want it right now. So you know what? I'm going to tell you. The three most common causes for horses that won't go forward are saddle fit, and sternum misalignment, and ulcers. In no particular order, could be any of those three. Okay, so if you'll stick with me, I'd like to talk through a case and first of all, how would I know those are the top three causes? And then how do you rule those out? Because let me tell you, you don't learn those top three causes in vet school. There's no class on that. You have to think through it. So I'd like to share that with you so you know how you can think through it too. Okay, once upon a time, I had a client named Steve, and he had a warm blood gelding. So Steve called me because his horse would not go forward. Now, I don't hear that very often. Usually it's reluctance to go forward or the horse doesn't really want to work. But Steve was very definitive. The horse won't go forward. So I show up, find Steve, and he comes over to me. He's like, "Hi, Doc. I have the horse ready. He's all saddled up to go. So you can see what he does for yourself." Well, that's kind of unusual to have the horse all saddled up, but that was cool. But I did say to Steve, "Okay, Steve, that's awesome. But could I have 5 minutes to ask you some questions? I like to ask questions before I look at the horse, so I don't prejudge things." So Steve understood that, and he's like, "Okay, cool." So I asked Steve lots of questions, and the key to being a detective is asking the questions. And so based on what I'm thinking for those three probable causes, I try to think of questions that would go along with that. So I said, "When did this start, Steve?" "Well, Doc, that started last week." I'm like, "Okay, cool. So all of a sudden, or do you think it had any hints of that?" "Well, Doc, now that you mention it, I think, yeah, he was hard to go forward for a couple months maybe, but you just kind of kick him into it and then he's fine." I'm like, "Okay, so it's been a little bit gradual, not night and day." He's like, "No, now that you mention it, it's been there for a little while. Just now he won't go at all." So that's very helpful information. Then I asked him, "Well, is it only when you ride the horse?" Now at this point, Steve, who was very tall, 6 feet something, he looked down at me because I'm pretty short, and he had this look on his face like, "Are you an idiot?" And I kind of caught that look. I was like, "Steve, I just want to know, can you lead the horse out of his stall and back? Is he fine for that?" He's like, "Okay, Doc, yes, that is all fine. It's only when you ride him." Okay, so I asked him a few more questions, such as, is he annoyed when you tack him up? Steve said he's fine, and he knew tack change, saddles or pads or girths, anything like that. And he said no. He says, "There are new riders. It's still just you." "Yes, it is." And then he wanted to know, what has he tried already and how did that work? And Steve said that he had tried rest. I thought maybe he's just muscle sore. Fair enough. Gave him 3-4 days off, but he was the same. And then he tried some bute. That's a very strong anti-inflammatory, if you guys aren't familiar with that. And he said, gave him 2-3 days of that, and that didn't change anything either. So with just those questions, I've ruled out the saddle fit. Because he said it's still him riding, so it's not, a different load on the saddle. He didn't change the saddle or the pad or anything like that. And the horse was fine for quite a while with this saddle since he's been using it this whole time. And then it's been a gradual getting worse. So that's more than likely not the saddle. I rule that out in my mind. Okay, so that leaves us with sternum misalignment and then the ulcers. Now, at this point, I did watch Steve's horse go, and it was really quite stunning, really. Steve got on the horse and, give him a little squeeze, and he didn't go. He refused to go. Steve even showed me gently, okay, it wasn't a big deal. He hit him lightly with the crop a couple times. Nothing. But the horse would back up. The horse will back up forever. The horse will also go laterally. He will not go forward. It's so curious. So this leads into, how would I know in the first place what the top 3 causes are? Like I said, it's not in vet school. So what you want to do is have a little knowledge of anatomy here, and I'll share that with you. But you also just want to put on your thinking cap and say, well, okay, what does the horse have to do to go forward? I know you're thinking that is a stupid question, okay? For the horse to walk, he uses his legs, Renee. What the heck? Okay, listen. Yes, the horse uses his legs, and we already know the horse's legs are not broken, so we can rule that out. But you want to think, what else does the horse have to do when he's carrying a rider? Because he can be led back and forth with no problem, but carrying a rider, not so much. So think of it like this. And you would figure this out by trying to use your imagination. Put yourself kind of in the horse's place to feel it out. If you think of carrying a heavy backpack, so not super heavy, so you got to bend over to carry it, but heavy enough where you feel it, 20, 30 pounds, depends on, of course, on your size, but a heavy backpack. Well, immediately you feel it and your muscles tighten up in your back and in your abdominals, and also you feel it around your shoulders where the straps are. Okay? You can probably imagine that. So for the horse, when they're carrying a heavy backpack, which would be a rider, their back muscles tighten up, their abdominal muscles tighten up, and there's the strap, which would be the girth in this case, right across the sternum. So the sternum is that breastbone of the horse. It's the bottom center of the barrel, right where the girth goes across. I know the girth goes across the whole middle of the barrel, but I'm talking about the center. There's a center bone there called the sternum. So that's why I think, what does the horse have to do to walk forward with a rider? They have to tense the back muscles, tense abdominals. And when you tense your abdominals, you could even try it yourself just right now, however you're sitting or standing, even laying down. If you tense your abdominals, you squish your stomach a little bit. It doesn't matter if you've eaten or not eaten, it still gets tense around the stomach area. And then, of course, with the girth being on the sternum, that might be affecting that. So those were the 3 things that I looked for when horses wouldn't go forward in my history of being a holistic veterinarian. And what I found is it's true. It's either ulcers, because the stomach was going to have ulcers the whole time, but when you squish it, because you have to tighten your abdominal muscles, they start getting agitated. And the horse will act up because when he goes forward, he's got to tighten the abs and it hurts. Same with a sternum misalignment. There's been plenty of times horses have been super girthy, and for example, and all you have to do is straighten the sternum out and the horse is fine. So things can be confusing, but it's just step by step asking a lot of questions, because there's many variables, but you can get rid of variables by asking more questions. Even the dumb ones, like how does a horse walk forward? Okay. So what the next thing I did with Steve's case is checking the sternum. Because with Steve, we had either the sternum was misaligned or the horse had ulcers. No other signs that Steve had noticed about ulcers. I will say that most people think of ulcers, they think of a really, honestly, severe case where the horse has got bad ulcers. They have black poop and they have an angry expression and they might grind their teeth and they might eat their food, or they eat their food, they try to eat. It's just, they're not right what they're eating. They're not comfortable and relaxed. People think of those things. Those are when the ulcers are really bad. Okay, so the horse can have mild to moderate ulcers and not want to go forward. Okay, so in Steve's case, all I needed to do was check the sternum alignment, which I did, and it was fine. So Steve's horse then had ulcers That was the first thing we did. I didn't even bother aligning the horse. You know why? Because when a horse has ulcers, their whole system is only interested in fixing the ulcers. They don't care how the bones are misaligned. If I ever run into an ulcery horse, I say, I'm sorry, you need to treat this horse for 30 days with ulcer treatment and get back to me. And that's what they do, because there's just no point in really trying to align a horse with ulcers. So Steve did the ulcer treatment that I recommend in my ulcer reports, as PDF reports. That's available. I'll put the link in the description. Okay, and then the horse was fine. I didn't even need to come back. He was perfectly fine going forward once the ulcers were taken care of. All right, a couple things. You may wonder, well, how do I check the sternum? Okay, that is in my book, Where Does My Horse Hurt? It is also a free video in my taster series of videos, also linked below, so you can check your horse for sternum alignment pretty good. So that's, in summary, if a horse isn't going forward, you've got saddle fit potentially, or ulcers, or sternum misalignment. And how you figure that out is ask a lot of questions to rule as much in or out that you can, and then do some basic checks like the sternum alignment check and figure it out from there. Most importantly, just keep asking questions, because there's always an answer out there.